Hi everyone, welcome back. It's been a while since my last video on the Santa Maria, and over the past year a lot has happened. Some of that time was spent dealing with health issues, but much of the time was spent learning, refining skills, working deeply in Photoshop, learning matte painting, exploring ways to bring ship models to life beyond the workbench. During that time I created a piece called Laurent Dorado, which you will see at the end of this video, and I also launched Van Mac Photography as a way to explore that visual storytelling further with newer examples. Today I'm starting a new build, the HMS Endeavour by OcCre, and in this series I want to focus not just on construction, but on atmosphere, history, and the feeling these ships meant to carry. If you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new, I'm glad you found your way here. Let's get started. Basically, with all OcCre ship models, we start with revealing the plans and numbering all the cutouts, along with the skeleton assembly, making sure everything is straight and the ribs are 90 degrees to the main spar. With the Endeavour, there are 3 decks. Be careful not to waste any line width strips. You might come up short during the veneering phase later. One of the reasons I chose the HMS Endeavour as a project was because of Captain James Cook. I've been to New Zealand 3 times and explored the Mount Cook area from the west and east side on the South Island, plus Property Bay, Gisborne area on the North Island, where he made landfall with the Endeavour on his first voyage in 1769. When I found out Captain Robert Fitzroy was at the helm of the HMS Beagle, that was the deciding factor to build the Beagle as my first ship model. I've also been to the Mount Fitzroy area on the Chile-Argentina border in Patagonia. I really enjoyed that trip to South America. I'll share some photos in the upcoming parts of this series. It's time to start the planking. For this build, it's fairly easy, just time consuming. It took me about a month to complete with basically straight cutoffs bow to stern. You let the planks fall into place with the typical cutout areas left to fill in. During this process, I was curious about the Endeavour, why it had such a blunt bow. My thought was that this ship wasn't going to set any speed records. Endeavour's blunt bow or bluff bow was actually a coal cargo ship named Earl of Pembroke. With its flat bottom, bluff bow design, made the ship suitable for navigating shallow coastal waters, which also meant the Endeavour could be beached for loading, unloading, and cleaning. Captain Cook specifically approved this type of vessel for its stability and shallow draft, which was perfect for coastal exploration. Now that I have the whole planking completed, it's time to start on the bow and stern areas. I noticed on the plans the 12 pieces that make up the stern gap fill-in area are not the same as the ones received in the kit. There's quite a bit of difference. I took some of the planking strips and filled in these areas to provide some extra material for profiling the stern. In the end, only about 25% of the material was left, but it sure really did help. After more sanding and filling with plastic wood filler, then a little bit of more sanding, the stern area is basically finished. Okay, now for the bow area. OcCre provided 4 blocks of basswood. I really didn't have the correct tools for this, so I used a coping saw, a knife set, my Dremel tool, and a lot of 80 grit sandpaper. It took a while, but I finally got there. There's probably a much easier way to do this. Real quick, I wanted to show you that I drilled and fitted the rudder and keel assembly. The instructions called for this much later on. I decided at this point of construction it would be much easier, and this would lessen the possibility of damage in the future. With the bow and stern completed, it's time for lots of sanding and filling in the low areas of the hull with a plastic filler, and then some more sanding and profiling of the hull in preparation for the finished veneer layer. This now brings us to the end of part 1. Late last summer, as mentioned in the intro, I went through the process of learning matte painting in Photoshop. It's basically painting in a general outline, applying photos, 3D objects, then exposing the photos through a painting process, then finishing the painting with more subjects like rain, lightning, and waterfalls. In all, to create the León Dorado, it took over a month and 80 hours of work. León Dorado in Spanish means golden lion, which is the name of the ghost ship. Courting Disaster is another example, but not as complex. Both of these pieces are featured in my Etsy shop as digital downloads in Canvas Gallery wraps. I'll provide a link in the description below with a promo code for a nice discount. Over the last couple of months, I've been experimenting with turning my ship models into majestic-inspired scenes from the workshop back to the sea. I started with the Beagle by taking a photograph, removing the stand and background, adding the sails, then placing it in a dramatic scene. This brings the HMS Beagle back to life in a very powerful way. I also use this process with the Santa Maria by taking a static photo and adding furled sails in Photoshop. I experimented with different scenes and came up with this one in a bay outlet surrounded by mountains and fall-colored trees. I added the sailors for a more dramatic tone. Now the Santa Maria is back to life with their crew in exploring this inlet passage. Here's another quick example of the Santa Maria, removing the background and dropping it into a majestic scene with sails. I also experimented with turning it into an 1800s oil painting, which I find quite interesting. If you're a fellow modeler and you'd like to see your own ship presented this way, I'm now offering this as a custom service through my Etsy shop in Van Mac Photography. I'll leave my email address below in the description. I'll be happy to help you bring your ship back to life in a majestic, dramatic way. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in late February for part 2.